My parents made me sleep in the rooftop room because my sister was visiting with her husband. I said nothing until the next morning when a luxury car pulled up for me. That's when everything started to change. The man in the suit said my name like it was important, Engineer Sofia Herrera, and I watched my mother's spoon stop moving in the pot. I watched Daniela set down her coffee cup with this careful, controlled motion, like she was afraid of making noise. I watched my father lower his newspaper, not fold it, just lower it, and stare over the top of it at the black car idling outside our gate, at the man standing on our sidewalk in a charcoal jacket that probably cost more than our refrigerator. I picked up my bag, that bag I'd carried up the stairs the night before, when nobody looked at me, when my father turned his newspaper page, when Arturo laughed his little laugh about the heat. I picked it up and I walked out the door and I didn't say goodbye. Not because I was angry. I want to be clear about that. I didn't do it for drama or for effect or because I'd planned some cinematic exit. I didn't say goodbye because I knew, I absolutely knew, that if I opened my mouth to form the words, my voice would shake. And I had spent 8 months keeping my voice from shaking in that house. I wasn't about to let it shake now, so I just walked out, and behind me I heard Daniela say, "Sophia, what is he talking about?" I didn't answer. I got in the car. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the 8 months that came before it, and the 8 months don't make sense without my family, and my family doesn't make sense without a specific kind of love, the kind that looks like love from the outside, that has all the correct furniture of love, the shared meals and the holiday photos and the WhatsApp group, but that functions day to day like a low-grade erosion, like water finding the cracks in stone, patient, relentless, not even cruel on purpose, just indifferent in a way that accumulates. I'm 31 years old. I have a degree in software engineering from the Universidad de Guadalajara, a second certification in systems architecture from a program I paid for myself at 26, and a portfolio of freelance work that I'd been building quietly for 6 years before any of this happened. I'm telling you this not to brag, but because context matters. Because the story my family had about me, the story they'd been telling each other and, I think, genuinely believed, was that I was failing, that I was adrift, that I was a disappointment wearing the face of their daughter, and I had let them believe it. That was my mistake, maybe. Or maybe it was a calculated choice. I've gone back and forth on it in the months since. Here's what my family saw. A 31-year-old woman who had left a stable job at a logistics company in Monterrey 8 months prior, moved back into her childhood bedroom in Zapopan, and spent her days in front of a laptop doing, what exactly? Computer things. That's how my mother described it to relatives. She does computer things. She said it the way you'd say someone rearranges furniture. A harmless, purposeless activity. Busy work for a woman who hadn't found a husband yet, and didn't have the sense to keep a real job. What they didn't see was the software platform I was building, had been building, in fragments and phases for almost 3 years, most of it in stolen hours after Monterrey work shifts, on weekends, during the 4 months I'd spent in a studio apartment in Mexico City before the rent got unsustainable. When I moved back home, I moved back deliberately. The rent-free situation gave me the runway to finish it. 6 to 8 months, I told myself. Long enough to get to a version I could actually show someone. The platform was a supply chain visibility tool. Niche, I know. But hear me out, because the niche is exactly why it worked. Mexican mid-sized manufacturers have a logistics blind spot problem. They outsource fulfillment to third-party providers, and then spend enormous human energy chasing status updates, reconciling invoices manually, resolving disputes with no documentation trail. Expensive, slow, error-prone. I'd seen it from the inside at the logistics company. I'd been living inside it, so I built the solution I'd have wanted to use. Automated data aggregation from multiple carrier APIs, real-time exception flagging, a client-facing dashboard that a non-technical operations manager could navigate without training, an audit trail that held up in contract disputes. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a consumer app. It wasn't the kind of thing you could explain at a family dinner without watching people's eyes glaze over in the first 30 seconds. So I didn't explain it. I just built it. By February, I had a working beta with 2 pilot clients. Small companies, not paying yet, but using it, actually using it, logging in daily. By April, the platform had processed enough real transaction volume that I had data worth showing to someone larger, someone with distribution, someone who could take it from a promising tool built by one woman in a bedroom to something with actual market reach. I reached out to 4 companies, got responses from 2, had calls with 1. Aranda Corporation was the other. They came back to me in early May, which is when my sister Daniela and her husband Arturo arrived for their visit. Daniela is 4 years older than me. She married Arturo 6 years ago at a venue in Puerto Vallarta that my parents had financed a significant portion of, and they lived in a nice apartment in Guadalajara that Arturo's family had helped them buy. Arturo was in finance, regional accounts manager for a mid-sized investment firm, the kind of job that came with a title longer than its actual weight. He was handsome in the way that broadcasts itself, the kind of man who shakes your hand a beat too long and makes sustained eye contact to signal confidence. He called me Hermanita with a warmth that I had, at various points, wanted to find genuine. I didn't distrust Arturo, not at first, not even in the middle. He was just part of the furniture of my family, ambient, unremarkable, present. He also had, as I would eventually understand, a sizable personal debt problem and a specific interest in fast solutions. I didn't know this at the time. I'm telling you now so the rest of this lands correctly. They arrived arrived on a Tuesday. By dinner, Daniela had established herself in the living room. Arturo had opened 2 of my father's beers without asking, and the atmosphere of the house had shifted into the register. It always shifts into when Daniela visits. A few degrees warmer, louder, more performative. My parents love Daniela with an easiness they've never quite managed with me. She gives them grandchild speculation and recipe discussions, and the comfortable frictionlessness of a daughter who chose a legible life. I don't resent this. I mention it only because it's necessary backdrop. Wednesday evening, I came home from a coffee shop where I'd been working for 6 hours to close out a technical issue with one of my pilot clients. I had my suitcase. I'd brought it to the city center earlier that week for a meeting and hadn't unpacked it. I walked in through the front door, bag in hand, brain still half inside a code problem. My mother was at the sink. She said it without turning around. "Daniela needs your room tonight. Sleep upstairs." I stood in the doorway. "Sorry, it's just one night." That was Daniela from the kitchen table, already settled in, coffee in hand, leaning back, entirely comfortable, in my room, or about to be. "The couch hurts my back. You know how it is." Arturo said something about the rooftop being cooler, the kind of line that's technically a joke but lands like a small rock. My father turned a page of his newspaper without looking up. "Don't make drama, Sophia. Be grateful we still let you stay here." Grateful. I stood there for a moment, 5 seconds maybe, long enough to feel the particular quality of that silence, the way everyone in the room was very deliberately not looking at me, which is its own kind of looking. Then I picked up my bag and I went upstairs. The rooftop room is not really a room. It's a storage space that gained a folding bed at some point in the history of the house, probably during a period when the family needed extra sleeping capacity and optimism overrode practicality. The floor is bare concrete. There are boxes stacked along 2 walls, Christmas decorations, old tax documents, a broken exercise machine my father bought in 2009. There is a window unit air conditioner that functions at approximately 30% capacity and produces a sound like a small animal in distress. There is a fan with a cracked housing that wobbles when it runs, and which I did not risk running because the structural wobble suggested catastrophic failure was a possibility. It was May. Zapopan in May runs between 38 and 42 degrees. The roof collects heat all day and releases it upward through the floor all night. I lay on the folding bed, which creaked every time I shifted weight, and I stared at the ceiling, and I listened to my family laugh at dinner below me. I want to tell you I felt fury. Clean, clarifying, motivating fury. That would make a better story. What I actually felt was something quieter and heavier, a kind of tired that goes past the body. The feeling of being somewhere you grew up and realizing that the place has never quite had a shape for you. That you've been accommodating the edges of it your whole life and the edges haven't changed. I thought about the email I'd received 2 days ago. AITA Corporation had come back with a number, not a licensing offer, not a partnership proposal, an acquisition offer, the whole platform, plus my continued involvement as product director for a 3-year minimum term. The number had a comma in it that I'd had to read 3 times. I had forwarded it to my lawyer, Valentina Reyes, who I'd been working with since January, corporate specialist, 12 years of tech acquisition experience, and she had spent 48 hours going through it line by line and called me back to say, "Sophia, this is legitimate, this is real, you need to sign this." I had signed it yesterday afternoon. Valentina had witnessed it. The official transfer documents were processing. The formal announcement was scheduled for the following evening, a presentation dinner at AITA's executive terrace. I lay in that rooftop room, sweating, listening to my family laugh, and I thought, they have no idea. Not a guess wrong, not a miscalculation, no idea, 0 idea. The thing they were most certain about, that I was wasting my time, that I was a cautionary tale, that I was the disappointing daughter doing computer things in a bedroom, was the thing that had just 24 hours ago turned into the best exit from that bedroom anyone in this family had ever had. I set an alarm for 7:30. I thought I should try to sleep. I didn't, really, but I tried. In the morning, I came downstairs at 8:55, bag packed, hair done. I'd pressed my blazer with the travel iron I kept in my laptop bag. I looked, I think, like someone who had somewhere to be. Nobody asked. My mother was making eggs. My father was reading. Daniela and Arturo were at the table, Arturo with his phone, Daniela with her coffee, both of them with the specific comfortable sprawl of people who have made themselves at home in someone else's home. I poured myself a glass of water, stood at the counter, and drank it. At 8:58, a black Mercedes pulled up to the gate. The driver opened the door. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, scanned the address, and walked to our door. He was perhaps 50, silver-haired, unhurried in the way that professionally precise people are unhurried, every movement exactly as long as it needed to be and no longer. He knocked twice. I opened the door. "Engineer Sofia Herrera?" My mother's spoon stopped. "Yes," I said. "I'm Rodrigo Castellano, Executive Coordinator for AITA Corporation. I'm here to escort you to the executive offices and this evening's presentation event." He glanced past me into the kitchen with polite professional neutrality. "We have a 9:30 briefing with the legal team and the communications director before the public announcement." The kitchen had gone completely still. I said, "Thank you, Rodrigo. One moment." I turned around. My father had put down his newspaper, completely, both hands on the table. Daniela had set her coffee down. Arturo was looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, something calculating, something recalibrating. My mother was just standing at the stove holding a spatula, staring at me. I picked up my bag. "Sophia," my mother found her voice first. "What? Who is that man?" "That's Rodrigo." "What is AITA Corporation?" I looked at her. It's a company. I adjusted my bag strap. I'll explain later. Sophia, Daniela now. What is he talking about? A presentation? What presentation? I looked at my sister, at my mother, at my father, at Arturo, who had put his phone face down on the table in the last 10 seconds, which I noticed. The platform I built, I said, while I was doing computer things. I walked out the door. Rodrigo held the car door open for me. I got in. The gate closed behind us. I looked straight ahead and I breathed. The Aranda offices were in a tower in Providencia. 42 floors of glass and precision. The kind of building that reorganizes your sense of scale when you walk into the lobby. Emiliano Aranda's corner office was on the 38th floor with a view of the whole city. Zapopan visible in the middle distance. The grid of streets and rooftops that I'd grown up inside, looking from up here like a map of someone else's life. Emiliano was in his mid-50s. He had the quality of extreme competence worn lightly. Not arrogant exactly, but settled, the way people get when they've stopped needing to prove things. He shook my hand and thanked me for coming and told me directly, without preamble, that what had stood out about my platform was not only the technical architecture, but the fact that I had built the entire thing alone, concept through execution. No team, no co-founder, no outside development support. That tells us something about how you think, he said. Not just what you can build, but how you navigate constraints. I said I'd had a lot of practice with constraints. He smiled at that. Then he said, there's something we need to discuss before tonight's event. He opened a folder on his desk and slid it across to me. I looked at it. It was a guest list. The dinner was primarily a professional event. Aranda's executive team, 3 representatives from their investor group, a communications coordinator, my lawyer Valentina, standard for this kind of announcement. And at the bottom of the list, added in a different column, 4 names, my parents, my sister, and Arturo. I didn't invite them, I said. No, Emiliano said. I did. He was watching me carefully, not unkindly. 3 months ago, he said, someone attempted to sell us an early version of your platform, not a finished product, fragmentary, early architecture, core logic sequences, some preliminary data models, but recognizably yours, substantially similar enough that our technical team flagged it immediately. Given that we were already in preliminary conversations with you at that point, I sat very still. We did not engage with the seller, he continued. We retained the documentation. Our security director, Licenciada Fernanda Morales, has 14 years in corporate IP investigations. She worked with our legal team for the past 6 weeks to build a complete account of what happened, who had access to what, and when. The documentation is thorough. He let me sit with that for a moment. We think you know who it was, he said. I thought about Arturo's phone, face down on the table this morning. I thought about how every time I left my room, for groceries, for a shower, for any of the 100 small moments of daily life, I had trusted the closed door behind me. Arturo, I said. Emiliano nodded once. Tonight, he said, is not only your presentation dinner. He closed the folder. It's the last chance to handle this quietly, inside the room, before we forward everything to our corporate legal team for formal proceedings. I looked at the folder. I looked out at the city. Why give him that chance? I asked. Emiliano was quiet for a moment. Because his wife is your sister, he said, and his in-laws are your parents. And I thought you should be the one in the room when it happens, not us, you. I thought about the rooftop, the broken fan, the heat coming up through the concrete floor. All right, I said. I spent the afternoon in a conference room with Valentina Reyes, corporate attorney, 12 years in tech acquisition and intellectual property, who had been with me since January, and who reacted to the theft documentation with the precise, controlled fury of someone who is very good at converting rage into paperwork. She reviewed everything Licenciada Morales had compiled, time-stamped access logs, a file transfer trail that put Arturo on my laptop on 4 separate dates over 6 weeks, all of them during windows when I had been occupied elsewhere in the house. Partial source code files transferred to a personal cloud account registered to a shell profile that Aranda's investigators had traced back through 2 steps to a real name. It's clean, Valentina said. She was 43, efficient, with reading glasses she pushed up her nose when she was concentrating. It's very clean. He was careful about some things, but not careful enough about others. The timestamps are unambiguous. Is it enough for criminal charges? For civil action, absolutely. For criminal, theft of intellectual property, unauthorized access to a computer system, yes, I think so. But that's the prosecutor's call, not mine. She looked at me over her glasses. What do you want, Sophia? I thought about it honestly. I want him to have to say what he did, I said. In a room where my parents can hear it. She nodded, pushed her glasses up. Tonight accomplishes that. The terrace was on the 40th floor. It had been set up for the event with white tablecloths and low floral arrangements and the kind of atmospheric lighting that makes everyone look like they're in a film. The city spread out below, still golden at 7 in the evening. You could see everything from up there, the whole spread of it. I stood near the glass railing when they arrived, next to Emiliano, and I watched my family come out of the elevator. They had dressed up. That was the first thing I noticed. My mother in her good blouse, the dark blue one she saved for important occasions, my father in his sport coat, Daniela in a dress I recognized from her anniversary photos, Arturo in a jacket and open collar, looking from a distance like a man who was comfortable in rooms like this. They stopped when they saw me. I think it was the clothes, partly. The blazer I'd worn that morning was one thing, but they'd sent me back to the hotel. Aranda had arranged it, insisted on it, and I'd changed into something better, and I was standing next to Emiliano Aranda, one of the more recognized executives in Western Mexico, in a a room that was visibly not the kind of room our family occupied, with a city underneath me that felt, for the first time in my life, like it was arranged in a way that included me. They looked small inside it. That's the only way I can describe it, and I don't say it cruelly. They just looked like what they were, a family from Zapopan who had been handed an invitation they didn't understand yet. Emiliano welcomed them, warm, professional. He introduced me, formally, using my title, the one that would appear in the press release going out the following morning. He gave a brief account of the platform, accessible enough for a non-technical audience, and I watched my mother's face move through several expressions she couldn't quite control: surprise, recalibration, something like awe that she was visibly trying to manage. My father was very still. Daniela kept looking at me and then looking away, like she was trying to find the angle that made sense of what she was seeing. Arturo smiled and shook hands and said congratulations in a voice that sounded exactly like someone trying to figure out how much trouble they were in. Then Emiliano said there was a second matter. He set the folder on the table. He sat down, and the table sat down, and the shift in atmosphere was immediate, the dinner warmth draining out of the room, replaced with something cooler and more formal. Rodrigo, who I now understood was also Aranda's senior security coordinator and had been with the company for 11 years, stood near the door with a second folder. Emiliano explained, calmly and with specificity, what had happened: the attempted sale, the documentation, the investigation. He used words like unauthorized access, misappropriation of proprietary architecture, intellectual property theft. He laid it out chronologically, cleanly, with the particular precision of a man who had done this before and understood that the clarity of the telling was itself a form of consequence. He looked at Arturo, and he opened the folder. There were printed emails, Arturo's own words, in two separate exchanges with a broker who had approached Aranda's acquisitions team through an intermediary. The language was careful, but not careful enough. References to architecture I have access to, references to a timeline, references to a valuation number that was, the investigators had noted, almost exactly what he would have guessed from seeing my preliminary investor conversations on my screen. There were timestamped file transfer logs, 4 dates, times, duration, file names that matched my actual development files. There was a photograph pulled from the access log of my laptop's front-facing camera, which I had not known logged passively during inactivity. A face, Arturo's face, bent over my laptop in my bedroom, in the light from the window, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, when I had been in the kitchen helping my mother with something she'd urgently needed help with for exactly 20 minutes. My father's hand started shaking. I watched it happen. I watched them absorb it. The emails first, then the logs, then the photograph, and the photograph did something to the room. It made it real in a way that documentation doesn't always manage. It made it specific. Here is a person in a room they had no business being in, doing a thing they knew was wrong, in the house that belonged to his wife's family, while his wife's sister was in the kitchen. My mother put her hand over her mouth. Daniela had gone completely still. She was looking at the photograph, not at Emiliano, not at the folder, just at the photograph, with an expression that I can only describe as the expression of someone watching something they already knew become something they could no longer argue with. Arturo tried. I'll give him that. He said something about it being taken out of context, about how he'd only been looking, about how he'd never actually gone through with anything. Each sentence landed worse than the last. Each sentence was technically trying to reduce the thing and actually expanding it, because every qualification reminded everyone in the room of what was being qualified. Valentina, who was seated to my left, said quietly, Licenciada Morales, can you confirm the chain of custody on the photographic evidence? Licenciada Fernanda Morales, 14 years in corporate IP investigation, seated 2 chairs down, said, confirmed. The log data and images are unaltered originals extracted from the device by our team. Documentation on file. Arturo stopped talking. Daniela had been very still for a long time. Then she reached up and removed her ring. Not dramatically. Not with a speech. She set it on the white tablecloth gently, and she did not look at Arturo again. Not for the rest of the evening. She just looked at the city through the glass, and then she looked at me, and her face had a quality in it that I had not seen from my sister in a very long time. Something stripped of the performance of things. Just the face underneath. My parents turned to me. My father had aged in the last 10 minutes in the way people do when the map they've been using turns out to be wrong. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He looked at me with something I had not seen from him in so long that I had stopped expecting to see it. Shame. Clean. Quiet. Undefended shame. He said it quietly. We're sorry, Sophia. My mother nodded. She was crying, not with drama, just with the tears that happen when something releases. I looked at them for a long moment. At my mother, at my father, at my sister, who had already made her decision and was looking at the city. At Arturo, who was looking at his hands. Arturo, who had laughed about the rooftop, who had said it was cooler up there with the easy comfort of a man who knew he would sleep in a good bed that night, who had sat in my family's kitchen and built himself into the furniture of our lives and used the access that came with it to walk into my room, my work, my 3 years of solitary effort, and help himself. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired and clear and certain in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Last night I slept on the roof, I said. Tonight I own the room. Rodrigo informed Arturo that the documentation had been forwarded to Aranda's legal team and would be referred to the appropriate authorities the following morning. He was advised advised not to leave the city. He nodded. He looked, in that moment, exactly as small as I had felt on the route. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because it was true. My father asked if there was anything he could do. I told him I would call him in a few days. I meant it. The formal charges were filed 3 weeks later. The prosecutor, Licenciado Marco Ayala, worked with Valentina and Aranda's legal team through the summer. The case was solid. The evidence Licenciada Morales had assembled was, as she had indicated, thorough. Arturo's attorney negotiated. There was a civil settlement and a formal acknowledgement. The criminal referral remained open at the time of writing. Daniela filed for divorce in June. I haven't asked her for details. She hasn't offered them. We talk differently now, less and more carefully, and with a directness we never quite managed before. I think she's figuring out who she is on the other side of something. I understand that. My parents are different, not transformed, not entirely. People don't work that way, but different. My father calls me on Sundays now. He asks questions, real ones. He listens. My mother sent me a message a few weeks after the dinner that said, "I didn't understand what you were doing. I should have asked." 7 words of acknowledgement from a woman who doesn't apologize easily. I put it in my notes app and I look at it sometimes. The platform launched publicly in July. We onboarded 12 clients in the first quarter. The team is now 7 people, all of them better at their specific functions than I am at those functions, which is exactly what you want. My office is on the 36th floor, glass wall, view of the whole city, Zapopan in the middle distance. I think about the rooftop sometimes, the heat coming up through the floor, the fan with the cracked housing, the particular quality of lying in the dark listening to your family laugh without you. I think that was the last night of one thing and the first night of another, and I didn't know it yet, and that might be the only way those nights ever work. You don't know which darkness is the last one. You just stay in it until the morning comes.